Mr. Weber?
Yeah, I was looking through, I downloaded the 14th Amendment. There's been a lot of Supreme Court cases. Civil Rights Act of 1964 was upheld. This approach in the heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States. Justice Joseph Bradley made a really interesting comment about it. He said, quote, individual invasion of individual rights is not the subject matter of the 14th Amendment. It has a deeper and broader scope. It nullifies and makes void all state legislation and state action of every kind which impairs the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States or which injures them in life, liberty, or property without due process of law or which denies them equal protection of the laws. He goes on. The radical Republicans who advanced the 13th Amendment, which was abolishing slavery, hoped to ensure broad civil and human rights for the newly freed people. But its scope was disputed before it even went into effect. The framers of the 14th Amendment wanted these principles enshrined in the Constitution to protect the new Civil Rights Act from being declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court and also to prevent a future Congress from altering it by mere majority vote. Who was the focus? The newly freed people. Not everybody trying to get her by hook, crook, or cranny.
Oh, understandable. And it's ridiculous. We're the only country that has it, and certainly the only country that has it to that extent. And it wasn't meant, if you look, it was really meant for children of slaves. This is when it happened. The children of slaves, it was not meant for everyone to come into our country by airplane or charging across the borders from all over the world and think they're going to become citizens. It's not meant for that. It wasn't meant for that. And hopefully at some point the courts will understand that without having to go through a whole big deal. This was meant for the children of slaves. And look at the timing of it and you'll see. And I hope judges will understand that. And it has to stop because it's really hurting our country very bad.
Point out that in the 14th Amendment, it does not say all persons born in the United States become citizens of the United States. It's all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That amendment was passed coming out of the Civil War. There's a reason it was passed coming out of the Civil War. Congress was afraid the Democrats would try to undermine the results of that war by forbidding former slaves from voting. And clearly that's what the amendment was supposed to deal with. It did not include anybody who just happened to show up here and have a baby and moved on.
This next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Yeah, that's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
What about that one in the course? That one is likely to be challenged.
Could be. I think we have good grounds, but you could be right. I mean, you'll find out. It's ridiculous. We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright, as you know. And it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Racism question, which I talk about a lot in my book. No. The reason Americans are sensitive to the race issue particularly is because of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. That's why we have civil rights laws. That's why we have affirmative action and set-asides. But then suddenly one day, out of the blue, people used to talk about integration all the time. It was integration. You don't discriminate against black people, which we had to spend 100 years teaching the Democrats not to do. But that is all about American blacks. It's not about someone who has never set foot in this country before. It's liberals who are the racists who say, oh, you're all brown. We're going to treat you like American blacks. And it's really kind of shocking. I mean, I don't know if maybe some of you know this. Jesse Jackson used to stand at the border denouncing the illegal immigrants coming across. Cesar Chavez denounced them as wetbacks, driving down the wages of the poor. But today, you can arrive from, the Sudan yesterday. You will get affirmative action applying to college. You will get affirmative action applying for government business loans. The 14th Amendment was about one thing, again, utterly insulting to black Americans. The 14th Amendment, why was that passed? So that someday La Raza could usher across Mexican women who were 8.5 months pregnant. They could drop a baby and say, "Ha, you didn't catch me. I'm an American citizen now." No, people don't put trap doors in a constitution. A secret trap door, ooh, this will surprise them. To get an amendment passed, you need a mass feeling about a big thing. We had just fought a civil war to force, again, the Democrats to stop enslaving blacks. The 14th Amendment is absolutely exclusively about black Americans. That's what it's about. And by the way, it's not about gay marriage either, but they're at least gay Americans. Here we're talking about people who've never set foot on U.S. soil before, playing a game of Red Rover with our Border Patrol for the most precious possession in the universe, citizenship in this country.
I'm going to start by reading the opening words of the 14th Amendment, and this is going to be a touchy discussion about birthright citizenship in the United States. Section 1, Amendment 14. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, those are key words, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Those are the opening words of the 14th Amendment. Now, there's a beautiful vision enshrined both in the Constitution overall and in the 14th Amendment in particular. It's that your citizenship in this country isn't based on your lineage, your bloodline. It isn't based on even your religion or your adherence to a particular set of cultural customs or even your language that you speak. No, that's not what gives you citizenship in the United States. And what's enshrined in the vision of birthright citizenship is to say that regardless of your skin color, regardless of where your parents came from, regardless of what your religious beliefs are or may be or become over the course of your life, you're a citizen of this country if you owe a duty, your fealty, your allegiance to this country, and we presume that when you're born here. This has been construed, however, far too broadly and exploited, especially in the last several years, of mass migration policies into the United States. And let me explain how that works. Today, it turns out that if you're born as the kid of legal immigrants or as somebody who is already a citizen of this country, you automatically enjoy citizenship. That's what that 14th Amendment says. But it's been wrongly construed by the policies, frankly, of both political parties to somehow mean that the kids of illegal migrants also enjoy birthright citizenship. And that's just false. I go back to those words of the 14th Amendment. You start with the text and see what it actually says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. What do those extra words mean? Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That means if you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, then you don't automatically enjoy citizenship just because you're born here. Well, that means if your first act of entering this country was to break the law, then that means that your kids who are born here are not subject to the jurisdiction in the same way. I'll walk you through a thought experiment to make that clear. Let's say the kid of a Mexican diplomat is born on U.S. soil. Does that make that person a citizen of the United States? The answer is no. Turns out every court, every legal scholar across the board agrees with you. Just because the physical act of that person being born in the United States, that diplomat or that ambassador's son, still does not give that son birthright citizenship in the United States because he wasn't subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, that's an analogy, a thought experiment to say that, okay, if the kid of somebody who crossed our border legally to be an ambassador here, that kid doesn't enjoy birthright citizenship, then neither does the kid of somebody who crossed that border illegally either. If they have to be extradited to their home country to be tried for a crime, that means that they're not actually subject to the jurisdiction. So we don't need another constitutional amendment. Our Constitution's a beautiful thing. We don't need an amendment to that Constitution. This is where a lot of Republicans have lost the plot. What we need is a willingness to actually swear an oath to the Constitution and keep it, saying that from certain date going forward, the U.S. president and a new administration states with clarity that those born after that date in the United States of illegals will no longer be citizens of this country. That eliminates one of the main incentives that people have to illegally enter the United States and establish roots with an anchor baby here in the first place. Now, this could be a seismic change in solving the illegal mass migration problem in America. It takes courage. It's going to be wildly controversial, but it's coming from me from a personal place of saying, I am the kid of immigrants, legal immigrants who came here in the right way. This isn't racist. It's not xenophobic. It's standing for the rule of law. It's standing for what's actually enshrined in our Constitution. If your first act of entering this country broke the law, then you don't actually have the same protections under those laws that the people who ultimately were born here or came here the right way actually do. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law. That's what's going to put us on firm footing to say that the entire family unit, including even kids who were born here of illegal migrants, will be returned to their country of origin. We'll do it respectfully. We'll do it as decently and humanely as possible, respecting each person's humanity. But that doesn't give them an automatic right to enjoy the privileges and immunities of citizenship. That's reserved for citizens. And so what is this idea of citizenship all about anyway? Could you be a citizen of both countries? Could it be that both countries have jurisdiction, you're a citizen of both countries? I don't think so. In fact, I know not. Citizenship is about one thing above all. Anybody who's become a naturalized citizen of this country, who's come to this country through the front door and became a citizen through that naturalization process, knows that the final step of the process is swearing an oath of allegiance to this nation. You can't have multiple different allegiances to multiple different countries. That destroys the concept of citizenship itself. And so by definition, each person can only have an ultimate allegiance, an ultimate national civic allegiance to one nation. If two nations were to go to war, be in conflict with one another, that would automatically negate the allegiance of one person to one of those countries versus another. So I think that ultimately citizenship is about loyalty. You can only have loyalty to one country. And if you have loyalty to that one country, yes, you're subject to the jurisdiction of that country. That's what citizenship is about. That's what birthright citizenship in the United States is about. And that's why we will be on firm constitutional footing as a country if we take that hard step of saying that birthright citizenship per our Constitution under existing law without any further amendment does not apply to the kids of illegals. A critical step.
The 14th Amendment was passed in 1868 to protect the rights of recently freed slaves. It has two important clauses, the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person the equal protection of the law. Corporate lawyers wasted no time in bringing cases before the court saying, hey, corporations are persons too, and we deserve all the rights of people under the Constitution. The court said, no way. This amendment is to protect the rights of black men. And then, in 1874, women gave it a go, claiming that the 14th Amendment gave them the right to vote. And the court said, no, persons doesn't mean women. Corporate lawyers tried again and again to claim the rights of persons. And finally, in 1886, the court said, yeah, okay, go for it. And they did. In the 20 years between 1890 and 1910, the court heard 19 cases dealing with African Americans and the 14th Amendment. But they heard 288 cases dealing with the rights of corporations and the 14th Amendment. And women, although they got the right to vote in 1920, are still not guaranteed the equal protection of the laws by the 14th or any other amendment.
Hey y'all, Yolanda here, and I just wanted to pop on for a second because one of the legal briefs I want to just focus on as quickly as possible, because this would be a full lecture on politics as it relates to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We don't have that kind of time, but I do want to hit the highlights because this is important because your boy, Circus Peanut, tried to, on one of his first executive orders, was to try to unilaterally say, oh, hey, this whole this birthright citizenship, it doesn't exist anymore with the swipe of his Sharpie pen. That's not how this works. And I think it's important that while it was done for shock value, which a lot of this is, please don't misunderstand, a lot of this chaos, this, you know, litany of order after order after order after order, the hope is that you're going to tune out, you're going to be so overwhelmed, you're not going to care anymore. And I said this in a previous brief, you create chaos to distract from the real thing, you're focused on this thing, you forget about the real thing, and then that gets slid in through the process of Congress or a big bill or whatever. Anyway, I digress. Why is it so important to understand the particular language that this administration has a problem with, in addition to why it matters from a historical standpoint? Real quick. So the 14th Amendment, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment are all amendments that happened during Reconstruction. Reconstruction happened at the end of the Civil War, which the South lost, the Confederacy lost. I almost feel like I have to say that because there's a lot of people who really don't believe that. But anyway, the Confederacy lost. And what Reconstruction was to, one, now you have this entire humongous population of formerly enslaved people who now are granted citizenship, which now changes the dynamics and the proportionment of Congress for Southern states to give more representation. But now you have this influx of men, not men and women, because they haven't decided that women can vote yet. But this influx of men who are now voting. So now this is where you have the very first black senators and representatives, your Hiram rebels, all of those from Southern states, primarily, who are getting elected to Congress. And so what's happening during this time is an effort to not only just grant the citizenship, but to provide equal protection under the law, to give a basis for challenging discrimination, all of those things. Well, what happened as a result of that? Naturally, white supremacists are the ones who then fight back, if you will, but they don't fight in a way that makes sense or that is legal. What they do is they use violence, they use terror, and they use voter suppression. They use the media. They use all of these things in newspapers to now scare white folks into thinking, here comes the big black man, and he's going to take your women, and he's going to ruin your life. And takes away from the whole point and the purpose of Reconstruction, not just to physically reconstruct the South, but to create a vision. And you know what's so crazy that people forget? These particular amendments were from a Republican Congress. But you have to understand politics to understand that the Republican, then the party of Lincoln, that you hear a lot of Republicans say, we're the party of Lincoln. No, you're not. You stop being the party of Lincoln when you allowed the Tea Party to erupt during the Obama administration. We could talk about this forever. But that was the Republican Party back then, not the Republican Party, the modern day Republican Party. So when white supremacists in those southern states use those tactics, that then, and you get public opinion by wrapping the media into that as well, in this case newspapers, that becomes the basis of segregation in the South and ultimately Jim Crow laws. All of that to say it's important to know, because the whole play here is to, if you get the citizenship challenge before the Supreme Court, the hope is that the Supreme Court is going to somehow analyze that and say, gee, you know, you're right. If you're born here, or what naturalization is, that shouldn't be here anymore. Now, even with this Supreme Court, I don't see that happening. But the fact that you are now having a press secretary to double down on this, like she doubled down on this and basically said that the Constitution, the language in the Constitution is unconstitutional. The language in the Constitution is not constitutional. Setting it up for some legal challenge to destroy naturalized citizenship. This is what they did in North Carolina. This is what I jumped up and down about that when they tried to change the language to say all citizens 18 years of age, blah, 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 have the right to vote. And they specifically removed the language as it relates to naturalized. Jumped up and down about it. But unfortunately, people don't really know the difference between being born here and being naturalized here. And that's what they're going after. Notice that I'm pretty sure in most of these big cities that are being raided, they're not raiding Russian communities. They're not raiding European communities where there's the same rate of people who are undocumented. Surely you see where they're going with this. But the bigger picture is, don't get caught for the banana in the tailpipe, the okie doke. Focus on the main thing. be vigilant and be vigilant and make sure you're paying attention to what your congressperson is doing. And I would really hope, although I don't have a lot of hope in it right now, that these Republican senators really will get a backbone. But you know what you also can do? Pay attention to the 3 seats that are up for grabs that have been cleared out through these circus peanut appointees, because that could potentially change the House and ultimately blow up this whole trifecta that the party has. More on that later.